Give me a second. Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the What's Up Wednesday, More Than Alt Text, Game Design for Accessibility webinar with Chris Hopper, Accessibility Consultant, Steph Campbell, owner and wearer of many hats at TTRPGkids, George Bergstrom, the Southern Regional Coordinator at the Professional Office of the Indiana State Library, and the stage mage of ALA's GameRT, Katie Lear, therapist and founder of Young Dragonslayers, and Sara, Nurrenenbern, disability advocate. My name is, of course, George Bergstrom, and I will be the question moderator for today. This webinar is also being co-sponsored by the American Library Association's Games and Gamer Roundtable. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few quick announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. And GameRT would also like to announce that this year's Roundtable Spectacular will be held on October 24th, 2025, and the theme this year is intellectual freedom. I'll be dropping links in the chat once we get started. This session is 1 hour, so you'll be receiving 1 LEU for today. If you are watching the archived recording of this webinar, the instructions on how to obtain your LEU are available in the video's description on YouTube. Or you can also find those instructions on the Indiana State Library's Continuing Education website under the LEU policies. I'll now turn it over to Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Hopper. I am an accessibility consultant in the tabletop design sphere. I work with tabletop gaming publishers to make their PDFs screen reader friendly and with tabletop game developers to make their game designs more accessible both physically and digitally. I work with virtual tabletops to provide alt text and HTML ready inputs and conversions. So we take games and we ingest them into a form that can be digitally distributed, and we look at what the difference in the digital medium looks like. And recently just wrapped up my first Unpub mentorship, which was super exciting. So shout out to that group. I want to start us off today talking about what I do in accessibility, which is the kind of direct line when people talk about hiring an accessibility consultant, when they bring somebody in to make their game accessible. Just a quick overview of what that process looks like. All of this information, by the way, is included in a document which Steph has linked on the YouTube video, and we can drop in the chat maybe. And it's around the various resource places. We provided all this info in a resource document, so please don't feel like you have to absorb it all from my words because they might be fast. So we all this information is also available in the document for you to explore at your own time. So in making a tabletop role-playing game accessible, the first thing that we do is we work on the visual hierarchy of the game. Tabletop role-playing games, perhaps more than other books, are largely a visual medium with a text interchange. And so it's not always presented as straightforward as a textbook or a manual. It's usually designed with a particular stylization. Maybe it looks like an ancient medieval record, or maybe we are going for a cutting edge sci-fi. There's some visual component that is really relaying the theme of the game so that the players and the GM, because this is first a document for the game master, can get into the vibe and the feel and start engaging with the text. And so it's important when coming into a game that we preserve that visual hierarchy while still working within that brand. We do that through color, size, and placement. We do that with how the document is physically laid out, and then also how how the text flows. We'll review chapter to chapter, make sure that we're creating a funnel that is a logical user experience. For large publishers, there's a team that does this. You have 6 or 8 editors. For indie pubs, you might have just, written this cool 24-page zine in a weekend. And so finding that that hierarchy and finding that funnel through your text is where I come in and help on the text level. Then there is the actual form of digital distribution. Your book, at this point, there's design question. We make sure that the font is dyslexia friendly. We make sure that there's a good level of contrast. We make sure that there's the physical requirements. The next step is PDF remediation. As librarians, you may be familiar with 508 compliance. This is just 508 compliance applied to tabletop gaming. I actually come from a library background. I was a shelver and a clerk for a few years, and I learned about PDF remediation through my technical writing degree and through tech writing classes in college, and brought that in here. And so when we do PDF remediation on a tabletop role-playing game, it's the same process. We're going to make sure that our tags are correct. We're going to make sure that all of the images have appropriate alt text. And I'll talk about that alt text a little bit more in a minute. We make sure that heading structures and tables and bookmarks and all of those features of a PDF are working in such a way that it is screen reader friendly, but also that it's joyous to use for your average end user. Accessibility always upraises all users, and that's an important takeaway. And so the end result in a accessible TTRPG PDF is that you have descriptive alt text that brings the images to life and augments them with maybe either fun details, or if it's a setting that people are familiar with, setting specific details, named characters that are the iconics that repeat throughout the book being described early on, um, document language being repeated inside that, stuff like that. Um, I don't have to tell anyone who's ever used a PDF how wonderful PDF bookmarks are, right? Having a properly detailed and bookmarked and layered PDF, again, benefits every user. And then we test. We test and we test and we test and we verify and refine until we have something that runs through JAWS and runs through whatever assistive tech. Ideally, from there, in some cases, I've been able to work down to a plain text version that can be fed into braille readers. This is something that I'm excited about. But that really depends on the game. Sometimes that's more feasible than others. And so working into a plain text version, if you're a game designer, if you're in here thinking about how you might make games or thinking about how you might work with your students to make games, designing for plain text, making something that they can put into just a descriptive string is a huge boon, because that can obviously be accessible on any device and anything. The next step up from that is HTML, and then back into the PDF world there where most tabletop role-playing games exist. So that's the remediation that I do. You can find this on a lot of your big name publishers now. I work with MCDM and Brotherwise Games. The Cosmere RPG is absolutely accessible. Drive Through RPG has a tag that you can sort by, and there's a couple of third-party groups spinning up to help find accessible games. In addition to that, George will talk more about get other layers of access within your communities. Another thing that I do, and this is all tee up because I want you to be able to ask me questions. So I'm tooting my horn here for a minute because I want you to be able to say, Chris, how do we do this? And so please accept this introduction as a beginning of dialogue. The other thing that I do is create GM and player tools to ease use of whatever game. And so an exciting example of this is with Brotherwise Games next week, we're coming out with a bunch of new tools in an update specifically to make running their big campaign easier. We're adding GM tools so that it's easier to keep track of things. We're adding printables so that you can take notes specific to that adventure. If you're a game designer, or if you're thinking of game design, or if you're facilitating Dungeons and Dragons, if you're facilitating a club in your space, I really encourage you to think about the kinds of note taking that you have to take as either a player or a GM and how you can facilitate those. Whether it's a form or a pre-built checklist, or whether it's portable stat blocks, or one thing that I love to do just personally is like keep checklists, or digital checklists that I can swipe through as we move through an encounter so that my beat sheet is on track. Um, Developing those tools is a huge boon that can usually be it can usually be a fairly small lift on the prep end. It's the type of thing where if you're facilitating games, if you're building a specific encounter in mind, you've probably done these steps, but formalizing them into a document that's repeatable and distributable will give other people running your game, or other people running games that you've run in the past, a tool to move through them more smoothly with their audience. So that's what I do in accessibility. That's that's the bird's eye view of accessibility consulting, as brought to you by Chris Hopper, this guy that wandered into this 5 years ago. Um, I want to introduce the rest of this panel though, because that's just the surface of accessibility. That's the beginning of where we're at. And Steph, I have to apologize because I think we're going to you next, but I'm not certain. Yes, Steph is next. And so I'm double checking our list here. Everyone else on this panel works in different areas of accessibility. So mine's publishing. I work with publishers. I make print products. I make digital products. I make remediation. Please ask me questions. I will be happy to answer them. Steph, talk to us more about your interface with accessibility.
I'm not on mute anymore. All right. So I'm Steph from TTRPGkids. So TTRPGkids is an all ages web resource. So it's a website that has, I think, 600 or 650 articles at this point that focus on games that are going to be fun and accessible for all ages. So this isn't just small children, but it's going to be for adults who are playing the games with small children, teens who are also included in the group. It's also going to be for seniors who have sometimes like similar needs in terms of being able to use small game pieces, being able to, or needing large text or maybe a screen reader in order to help with absorbing visual content and things like that. So that's one of the things that I've kind of learned through creating the resources on TTRPGkids is what's helped with introducing games to my child, who is now 7, but we've been doing this for about 5 years, is that when I've adjusted our games to be more accommodating to my kid, it's also helped me to engage with the games more. And then it's also helped me to bring other new players into the game. So things like having shorter game sessions, allowing for breaks and whatnot are also accessibility tools. One of the games that I've made is called A Construct's Nature. It's this big, chunky solo journaling game that has 10 chapters in it. And I made sure there were chapters that at the end of each chapter, it says something along the lines of, your character is taking a rest, and now you should take a rest too. So it prompts you to put the game down for a little bit and take a break. Because I know for myself, if somebody gives me a big chunky book like that, I will try and do it all in one sitting and complete it, so I'm not thinking about it later. But that's not always like the best thing to do in terms of life. And so it kind of gives permission to take that break. Where that kind of is a transition into like my next step is with neurodivergence. I have a couple little bits and pieces that like I'm dealing with, and one of them does kind of relate to wanting to finish that book. So adding in things like breaks, putting in notes about how to run shorter sessions, how to or like incorporating activity. So coloring, drawing, getting up and moving around can all be things that end up helping not just
We're not hearing you, Steph. All right. Okay. Steph's coming
gotta
back
notice.
in. Everybody's coming back in.
Uh-oh, did we drop for a little bit?
We
We
froze,
might.
at least on my end, it froze up for a second.
Totally missed it because I had the presentation going.
Oh,
Yeah.
Should
I
I?
wish I could tell you where you stopped.
Okay. Do you know about when it like cut out?
Ah, man.
I think you were just starting your stuff on neurodivergence when I lost audio.
Yeah,
Okay.
just about
Yeah,
3
you
minutes
just
now.
finished about your book
Okay.
or talking about
First nature.
your book.
Yeah.
telling you to take rests.
Yep,
Okay.
that's what I last heard.
Sounds good. Should I wait a second for everyone to get back in, or are we good to go?
I mean, it's showing me that everyone's still in. So I mean,
Awesome.
if anyone wants to pop in the chat, if you're still seeing and hearing us, but okay, I got it. It sounds clear now.
Cool.
So.
Good to go.
Yep.
All right. So if we left off about taking breaks, that was something that like I know gave me permission to sort of take an accommodation for myself. Or it's something that's like a tool that I've built into some of my games to make sure that it's segmented and I can kind of, I don't feel like I'm stopping in the middle of something. And that's maybe kind of like a good segue into when we're looking at folks that maybe have their neurodivergent, so they have kind of there's useful tools that could help an individual, but you might not necessarily see it, or you might not necessarily like know that this person could be helped by something. Like there's being allowed to get up and move around while you're playing, or having like a coloring sheet, or incorporating activities into the game to help everybody engage. Looking at how player turns go around the table. Sometimes when I've had like a combat sequence with multiple players, if there's 6 people at the table, it can be a solid 30 minutes between your turn now and your turn in the next round of combat. And that can be really hard to wait through. So having something to do or engage players in that like kind of middle space while you're waiting can be helpful. And these are things that I found when incorporating into my games or incorporating accommodations or tools into my games for these. It helps everybody at the table, not just me or maybe the one player I talked to ahead of time who had asked for kind of some tools or resources. It helps everybody to stay engaged and to be able to enjoy the game, and it helps people feel comfortable as well. So that's an aspect of accessibility when it comes to game design that I think not necessarily everyone looks at or thinks about, because it's a little invisible sometimes. It's not always like something that we can see. So considering that during game design is important though, when I play tested Adventures in ADHD, this was a tabletop RPG D&D module that was focused on helping people start conversations about what it feels like to be an ADHDer. So the NPCs that you encountered all had some kind of quest that related to some common experiences that a lot of people have. And so the players' goals were to help them out or to go on like this adventure with this NPC and to start up a conversation. So in the group that we had, some folks were ADHDers, some folks were neurotypical, and we had discussions about that, and people were giving tips back and forth to the NPC. So it kind of gave that degree of separation where we could talk with an imaginary character. And then we found out that those tips that people had developed ended up helping everybody in the group in order to bring some of those into their own lives, not just within the frame of the game. So having something that starts up that conversation, you need to be a little careful about it, just to and make sure that you've got like solid safety tools set up at the base of your game. But it's something that can, like, just having that conversation ends up helping as well. And then where my background comes from, I started out in engineering, specifically in automotive. So I was a crash test engineer for a while. I also did body design. I was working on windshields, tailgates, etc. And some of the lessons that I learned there had quite a bit to do with accessibility. So it's a manufacturing situation. So a part that I designed needs to get installed in the vehicle. So we're looking at ergonomic requirements for installation. And then also looking at when we had variations on a part, how they were color coded with like little paint marks or tags to help everyone put the right part in the right vehicle, because there's multiple vehicles on the same line. And small things like making sure that we're not putting a blue and a green tag in the same area, because some folks are colorblind, or having a different mark instead of like just having it color coded. Also having it with like, this one has a dot, this one has a triangle, this one has a line on it. Still simple marks on the parts that can be easily distinguished, but there's an extra layer of accessibility for those. That goes for games as well. Many of the things that I learned there, how to handle small pieces, because there's a lot of fasters. There's tools that you can use for that, or looking at how to differentiate. It's very important in both manufacturing and in games. So looking at how other areas of life or industry and sectors handle accessibility is a good way to also bring additional factors into your game design. All right, and that's kind of my part. So now I'm going to hand things over to George.
All right. So when we talked about this stuff at GenCon, I was mainly encouraging the audience to think of their library as a resource to them. So since this audience is at least a little bit more librarian focused, I'm kind of flipping this on its head. So hopefully, as game designers are thinking about their game, they are engaging with their library to find playtesters or to try their new product out with audiences that they have not thought of before. Either way, you want to be making yourself welcoming and available to game designers in your area. It's a great way to strengthen your collections, to strengthen those connections with your community. They may have folks in their groups that have not used the library before. So that, of course, helps the library as well as the designer. And because we know as libraries that we love and work well with our community, you can then bring that resource and that strength to them in helping them out to understand all of these maybe invisible accessibility issues that Chris and Steph have talked about so far. So that's kind of the start of or my perspective. And as Chris said, I'll kind of leave that there so that you all can ask questions when we get to that point. So at this point, I am passing it off to Katie.
Hello, my name is Katie Lear. I am a children's therapist based in Charlotte, North Carolina. In my private practice, I primarily treat childhood anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. But during the pandemic, when we were all quarantining at home, like many people I know, I turned to TTRPGs as a way to have structured Zoom-based socializing that still felt like actual human contact with other people, which inspired me to start a therapeutic campaign for 6 girls in my community, really with the goal of addressing depression, social isolation, and giving people a lifeline who might not otherwise have had one while quarantining at home. The intention was that this was going to be a 6-week closed program that would be done once and never repeated. But at the end of that 6 weeks, the girls asked if we could continue playing. I was co-facilitating that group with a friend of mine who is an actor in New York, and I didn't have anything going on at that time, and he certainly did not in his industry. So we said we would continue for as long as the girls were interested in playing. That was 6 years ago. At least one of those girls is still with us as a high schooler now, and we are now running, as of this week, 26 groups for children across the country as well as internationally. So when I had started out, I did not initially plan on creating a space that prioritized accessibility and prioritized inclusivity. My focus was very much on anxiety. Arguably, we could say that OCD is under the neurodivergence umbrella. I would say yes, but I did not anticipate that I would suddenly see this large population of autistic and ADHD children expressing interest in the game. So I now know, somebody online recently said that like the Venn diagram between neurodivergent people, D&D fans, and the LGBTQ community is a stack of pancakes. I have found that to be true in our games, yeah. But I had to really learn and educate myself in this, and it came at a beautiful time in my life because I also around that time welcome home the baby who has been diagnosed as neurodivergent now. So I got the crash course I needed to be a good parent for him before I needed it. So, you know, this has really become a focus for us now is how are we creating inclusive neurodiversity affirming spaces that give children a safe structure to have positive social experiences with their peers. So we are not siloing neurodivergent children into their own groups. These are no longer therapeutic groups where we are explicitly trying to practice social skills or achieve certain goals. My real aim is setting up a table where everybody feels like they have a sense of belonging and everybody, neurodivergent, neurotypical, whatever, has the modifications to the game that they need to succeed, to have a positive experience, to make friends with their peers, and to feel like their skills and contributions are valued and heard, and this is a place where they belong, which sounds like it is also really a goal of libraries, right? A place where everybody belongs, regardless of where they come from and who they are. And as a part of that, I have gotten increasingly opinionated and vocal about the value of online spaces and virtual programming as being real and valid social experiences for children. So, you know, I know my personal library system has a lot of virtual programming these days. In my profession, in therapy, these screen-based activities are often seen as less than, or virtual therapy is often seen as somehow a compromise and a step down from in-person. And obviously, we all know the dangers of excessive screen time for children, and I would not dispute that, but I do feel like the dose makes the poison. And I also think that online activities fall into a lot of different categories, and some may provide more benefits than others. In my experience, running the overwhelming majority of our games virtually has allowed us to expand our accessibility to a much broader range of children and teenagers. So for many of our neurodivergent players, interacting online feels safer to them. It feels less overwhelming. It lowers the barrier to access for them to join these games and do something that might otherwise feel intimidating. I have also found for our anxious players, there are more opportunities to modulate the intensity of your experience when you are running an online game. You can mute yourself. You can turn off your screen. If you are somebody who is feeling overwhelmed or prone to meltdown, you are much more able to step away and do what you need to do to self-regulate without drawing attention to yourself needlessly in game, because you are able to adjust how you are seen by others. So we routinely have neurodivergent players in our groups who know that if they're feeling frustrated, they turn off their camera, they step away, no harm will befall their character while they are gone. It is a group understanding that, people don't have to ask permission to leave. Whether you are using the restroom, getting a glass of water, or taking a break to stim, or taking a break to self-regulate alone. That has been really useful. Certainly, this return to normalcy has been exciting for a lot of kids, but fairly heartbreaking for many of our chronically ill players. We have children in our program who have chronic conditions that make it physically difficult for them to access public spaces. We have children who are being treated for cancer. We have immune compromised children in the program. All of these children are going to struggle to access typical group environments and really mourned the loss of their virtual programming through their school districts when everybody moved back to real life, because they were once again being left behind. For those kids, online programs give them a much more genuine social interaction than they're getting on something like Minecraft or Roblox. I also think a lot about geographic accessibility. We have many players who are joining us from remote areas. We had a child playing with us in Washington State who was actually in such a remote part of the state that it was disconnected from the continental US, and the only way that you could go anywhere else in the country was to drive through Canada. He's not finding in-person D&D where he lives, right? Like, online is the option for him. If you don't have a parent at home who can drive you to these places, a dedicated, stay-at-home parent, it can also be really difficult to access programming regardless of how high quality it is. So I've just seen across the board virtual programming really increase the number of children that we can include and give a seat at the table. And I have been fortunate enough to hire dungeon masters who are smarter and more skilled at the game than I am, who can make really ingenious accommodations and modifications to how they are running their sessions that give these children a framework that allows them to participate with their peers. Steph is one of our brilliant DMs. I have many others who have backgrounds in education or helping professions. So I am happy to speak more to some of those specific accommodations if it is of interest to people, or to share some of the stories from our groups. But I think if I were to share just a couple briefly, we have a player who is autistic who is has selective mutism. It is very, very difficult for her to speak to peers outside of her home. And the only way she's been successful in doing this across her life is through role play. When she is playing a character, it's easier for her to speak, but it's still not 100%. Being in a virtual group has allowed her to fall back on using the chat, or to fall back on sharing memes when it is too hard for her to verbalize things. And her mother has let me know that even on days when she is very quiet in her group, the hour or 2 hours after her game ends are the most verbal she is with her parents all week. So being in that space where she is included and connected increases her ability to speak with her parents after session, and they get to connect with her in a more meaningful way. We also had a player with us for several years who had a rare and very serious progressive genetic condition. By the end of her time playing with us, she was housebound. She could not leave her home because she needed machinery and support that was only available there. Being online not only gave her access to friends in a safe environment and allowed her to do things that were not physically possible for her in her day-to-day life, but it also allowed her to decide how and when she wanted to disclose her disabilities to the group. As a child who was frequently seen, before she was heard, Her disabilities were very visible to her in life. She used a trach. It was noticeable when she spoke. She was a wheelchair user. Her disability was visible, and she actually chose for several years to keep camera off so that she could have an experience where she did not automatically have to disclose until she felt ready to do so. So I think in a lot of unexpected ways outside of traditional ADHD or social skills for autistic children accommodations, I have seen that these games can do amazing things for kids, and it's really lit a fire under my butt and changed my trajectory of my professional life because of how helpful it's been. I will pass it off now. I've yapped enough. Sarah, I will send it to you.
Okay. So I'm Sarah. I'm from Southern Indiana. Kind of going off what Katie said, speaking of disclosing, you can't see it, but I am wheelchair bound. So I have a form of ALS that isn't as aggressive as what you're probably thinking of. You know, you hear ALS and you're like, oh, you're dying. Well, you know, we're all dying. It's okay. But my part in this panel, I don't have professional, you know, I don't have any professional viewpoint. I'm just someone who plays games, but I have to do it a little differently. You know, sometimes my arms don't work right. I can't lift one arm, I can lift the other, or my legs never work. So if I'm looking to play a game, I have to find an accessible space, and that's obviously easier said than done sometimes. But anyway, my biggest thing about accessible gaming is don't ever assume, always ask people if they need help. Someone looks at me a lot of times and I'm seen as someone who can't do for herself. That may be true in some ways, but if you come up and treat me like that, then I don't have that opportunity to be a person. You know, I don't have that opportunity to bring myself to that game. Excuse me. So that is like probably the most important thing. And I suppose gearing it towards a library situation, if someone comes in a wheelchair on crutches with a cane, you know, speaking from a background of physical disability, don't rush and scramble to go do everything for them. They might not need the help, you know, and it just gives you a better sense of being. It would be the same as if I went up to somebody else, one of you on the panel, and just automatically, you know, said, okay, sit here, or I'm going to open the door for you, or I'm going to do this or this. And you're like, what are you doing? You know? So just be really mindful about how you're treating everyone that comes into this gaming space. That's just one of the most important things I can emphasize. Excuse me. The next point I have on my slide is about ADA laws. Yeah, they're great, but is your space functional? So my biggest problem personally, I sit in a power wheelchair. Those things are massive. I mean, they weigh like 800 pounds. They're big. I take up a lot of space. You know, and then there are people like me who are in a wheelchair, plus they have a computer that they communicate through, or they have, you know, a ventilator that comes with them. Yeah, a lot of times people like me, we just take up space, but that doesn't mean that we want to not be included. I mean, we need to be there. So basically, you know, it goes kind of back to the asking. You can always ask somebody, does this space look inclusive? Is this space going to work for you? if you're trying to set up your rooms in the library for accessible gaming, have somebody come in. You know, if you have a patron who's regular to your library or your space, ask them. Just be like, hey, can you come and roll through this set of tables or whatever? My local game store, I'm so sorry. My local game store just went to a new space about a year or 2 years ago. And before they did that, that was something they did. They had various people with various types of disabilities come in. They checked the aisle spaces, table heights, bathrooms. Both of their bathrooms are very accessible. It's wonderful. You know, it's just so important to make everyone feel included. It's not always easy to do, but it's very, very important. The biggest thing for me is, you know, risers for the tables. So for me to be able to wheel under a table and feel like I'm part of the group and just look like I'm in a chair, you know, to be able to reach things, that's a huge deal. Without risers on tables, I can't reach my pieces to board game, or I can't move my D&D figure. Like it's a big deal. Another suggestion is if you have laptops available, if you're running like a D&D campaign, using some of the online character generator, not character generators, the online, what do you call, what's the word? I'm trying not to use like names of,
The virtual tabletops.
yeah, virtual tabletops. That's a really great tool because now I can use that. My hand isn't tired from writing. Everything is kept track of for me. If I don't feel like I can roll the dice, it rolls it for me. So yeah, those are kind of the biggest issues in making sure your space is right. Not everyone feels included if they're not included. I mean, I know you want to include everyone, but it just takes a little extra work sometimes. But definitely, yeah, definitely use the resource of your community, the people who are in your library, just ask them, and they're usually going to be more than happy to help you. And this last one on my slide, I know it sounds silly, our limbs might work, or not, it might not work, but our brains do. It's just a matter of reminding people to treat gamers who are not necessarily as able-bodied as other people, or who might be neurodivergent or whatever. Don't speak loudly to them unless you know they need it. You know, I'm in this wheelchair and obviously my legs don't work, but my ears work fine. You would not believe the amount of people who come up to me and like want to speak very loudly and slowly. I'm like, okay, I'm going to speak that way back to you. You know, like it's just not a good idea. Just remember, always treat people like they can do it. They can do it physically, they can do it mentally until you know better. That's just kind of a good rule for life as well. But yeah, I mean, I think going towards the library aspect of this, those would be my biggest tips. It's been a very interesting transition from being an able-bodied person to so quickly transitioning into being a person who requires the use of a wheelchair, sometimes has to have the ventilator with her because I need my you know, my cough assist or something like that. You know, I've been very lucky because my local game store and my local groups have been very open to making gaming accessible for me, but you don't get that everywhere. So I would just really encourage you to, you know, take heed and take note of the things that everyone else has said on this panel in a professional aspect. Those are very important things to do. You know, you're going to draw more kids into your library, more adults into your library who are maybe not as able-bodied as other people. And that's the goal. You know, you want to get community to your library. So I guess that's all for me.
All right, so we do have one question before I read that out. I will go ahead and remind everyone that you can put your questions in the chat and we will try to address them. If there are questions that we don't get to, you know, if you guys are just so inquisitive that we don't get to everything, I will send all of the questions to the panel. We'll get some answers typed up and we'll send those out with the recording, etc. But the first question from Sara Verkamp. Are there any games you can recommend for beginners in TTRPGs that are fairly accessible?
Steph is the expert in this, but Steph, I have some opinions too.
If you want to start, be my guest, because I have like a list of 120 of them in my brain that I don't. Yeah.
Short answer, visit TTRPGkids.com. I will shamelessly plug Steph because they did not. Steph reviews how specifically to implement all these games for kids on that website with hundreds and hundreds of reviews and counting. That said, I am actually reasonably impressed with the new 5e beginner box that they just put out last week, which uses easy to read cards and symbols and board game conventions to make Dungeons and Dragons feel more like your typical game, your typical board game, and less like a pen and paper traditional tabletop game. It's a great introduction for younger kids who, you know, want to play Dungeons and Dragons specifically. If we're not talking Dungeons and Dragons, if you have a broader opening, Monty Cook Games No Thank You Evil is phenomenal and has a bunch of third-party supplements. It scales up and down depending on the complexity. And yes, that's also a good note, George. And those are my two go-tos. There are dozens of others. There are some friends I know that have made some really great games that I would love to shout out. And I will point again to Steph's website for those reviews. But Steph, do you have any to add besides those two?
Yeah, I will keep so I'm gonna stick to 3 like sets. So I make tabletop RPGs intentionally for like them to be rules light and easy to jump into. So I have some of my own listed on the site. And that is like me reviewing everything else is kind of my research to see what has worked and then applying like bits and pieces to different elements or drawing it out into like a new branch and whatnot. I would recommend to also check out Fari RPG is really good. He focuses on what like we've talked about are rules bright games. So they are relatively simple rule systems. They don't have a ton of extra stuff in there. They're easy to learn, but it's not just rolling like one die. They are still built into the story and have a strong connection to like the theme of the game that you're playing. So Fire RPGs, thank you for putting that in there, is one of my favorites. And that's kind of like a whole bunch of systems. So this is how I'm getting like a ton off the list, is kind of lumping them into general recommendations. And then for my third one, Hatchlings Games is a favorite, particularly the Inspirals series. So this is another like kind of rules light game system, but it teaches sign language as you play. So in order to cast spells, you need to sign them. And so you're encouraged to learn sign language as you're going through the game. And that one has like multiple angles of accessibility, both in like the rules light aspect. Like I played it with my kid when he was, I think, 3. Just because it was easy to teach. And then we picked up a little bit of sign language as we were going along. And then I see you recommended Luck of Legends. Yes, 100%. So Michael makes some amazing games, and like all of them are designed to be easy for new players to pick up. And then a lot of them also have a very educational angle to them, which is always a good bonus. So.
Can I add something real quick on that?
Go for it.
If you're talking about physical accessibility as well, one of the things we've learned to kind of keep people who are not necessarily able to get to the table every week or every month or whenever you meet, you can always do something like have a laptop at your table and turn the camera on. We use Discord as our server a lot of times to do that. You can video or audio chat. And then if the person at home has, I'm just going to say it out loud, D&D Beyond, yeah, I know. Then they can keep up with their stats and everything else from their end at home. So like there have been times when I've not been able to go out because, you know, it's flu season and everything is crazy and whatever, and I could get sick, or if I'm having breathing issues or something like that, I'm stuck at home while my group is on their campaign. So yeah, we set up Discord, we set up our video chat, and then I'm still involved. They can still see me if I want the camera on, or they can still hear me and I can participate and still be part of that group. So that's just physically my input about the physical aspect of it.
Great. Any other thoughts from the panel? All right. Well, I haven't seen a second question yet, so if anyone else out there has questions, feel free to throw those in. While you all are thinking about that, I will remind everyone that a link for the recording, a link to the resource doc that Steph just had the QR code up a minute ago, but I'll put that link in, and your LEU certificate, for those of you needing that, will come to all of you probably end of this week or beginning of next week. And if we do get any other questions, we will supply answers to those as well. But we do still have a few minutes left if anyone has questions you'd like to ask us. Okay, oh, here we go. Lillian asks, do you have any resources about making an accessible game? Short answer, Lillian, is yes. The resource doc that's on the screen now, which again, you'll get the link to that. But then I'll let the panelists add things if they'd like.
I think that resource doc is probably going to be your best short answer. There's been a lot of ink spilled on the detail of what it would mean to be fully accessible. For my part, the managing a well navigable digital resource, whether it's PGF or HTML, making your actual text as navigable as possible and as taggable as possible and as broadly applicable as possible is a huge boon. But the design itself of an accessible game takes into account things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, the just building toward those goals. That document's going to point you to specific resources for those. So we will get you that as quickly as possible so that you can dive into everything from considering how your math runs to considering how many paragraphs you're giving that GM to read.
I'll acknowledge we're getting quite a few thank yous. So I don't see any other questions. I am going to go ahead and end the recording.